I want to welcome you to the Charly Crawford Podcast. Let's ride.
Hello, everyone. Today, I'm so excited. We have Joel Cowley, the CEO of the Calgary Stampede, on the podcast today. Joel, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited about it. I'd love to be able to talk about a few different topics, but the first thing is I'd love to talk about your rodeo. I got to go to it this year. Jackie made it up there, and so I got to fly up there. I got to go watch it. I've never been there. Man, the energy level that you guys had in there was just cool. For one, it was awesome to watch. With your guys' cameras in the arena, I watched Tough Cooper back in the box, and the camera was like right there. And it made it feel like, I was like, man, no wonder it felt like when you watched it on the Cowboy Channel, it felt like you were in the arena. Like your guys' your production there at the Calgary Stampede is top notch.
Yeah, we're pretty proud of our production, both in stadium and with regard to broadcast, and bringing those views and that perspective to rodeo that you don't get with every rodeo. So we're pretty proud of that. I have to tell you, I enjoyed meeting Jackie. I made a point to catch up with her in the contestant hospitality area and talk to her and welcome her to the Stampede. And she didn't advance to our finals, but she set the arena record on her third performance, which is great. And I have to tell you, her first performance, so her first run in her pool, I was standing at the north end, and that calf was running right at me. She drew a hard running calf, unfortunately, was running right at me. And just as she began to throw, that calf took a left. And I was in my brain convinced, well, darn, that's too bad. And somehow she snaked that over that calf's nose. And I got to tell you, it blew my mind. There's only two things that I've seen that have been similar to that. One was I was at the Super Bowl when the Patriots came from behind to beat the Falcons. And I was sitting up in the cheap seats up in the corner of the end zone. I had an opportunity to sit down lower, but once I found out my defending champion Denver Broncos were not advancing, I bought the cheaper tickets. I was in direct line of a Tom Brady throw to Julian Edelman, where I was convinced he was throwing it away. And at the last second, Edelman cuts and catches that ball, and it was like, whoa. And then another instance, Lionel Messier, Argentinian soccer player. I was in direct line with a penalty kick behind that and saw him bend that thing in the upper corner of the goal, and it just blew my mind. And I'd tell you, Jackie's throw kind of blew my mind. I brought that up with her, and she said, yeah, I just got lucky.
Well, she had said that she got a chance to talk to you, and she was so impressed with how the welcoming everyone was there, for the breakaway. And, for us, just, I'd rodeoed for a long time. And so to be able to finally get to go see it. And then for her, the breakaway is so fresh, and it was going somewhere for the first time. And just the electricity in there, when you look up, I mean, there's it's so high, the stands up there and the amount of people. And, I was talking around, and I'd heard Cheyenne, I think 15,000 people is what the seating is. And they thought around 26,000 with the way everything sits and the way it lays is the crowd number at the Calgary Stampede. And you can feel it for an outdoor setting.
Yeah.
That's a lot of energy in one place.
And it's a very engaged audience, as you witnessed. And what's incredible about that is that's largely an urban audience. We sold 98% of our tickets across the 10 rodeo performances. And the incredible thing about that is that grandstand was built to also host horse racing. So if you're sitting on the ends on the lower level, you're not looking into the arena. Those were designed for horse racing and horses leaving, horses coming down the stretch. And so those folks that buy those seats are really watching on a video board in front of them, but they want to be there and they want to be a part of it. And that's just incredible. But most of them, it's urban Calgarians that probably go to one rodeo a year, and this is the one they go to. It's a tradition with their families. Their parents probably brought them, so they take their kids, and grandparents probably brought their parents. And we also have a large number of new Calgarians. So for the past decade, Calgary has been the fastest growing city in Canada. And a lot of that is interprovincial migration, so people coming here from other provinces. But we also have a lot of international immigration. And you see a lot of that on park, and you see that in our rodeo stands, that they want to be part of the Calgary Stampede. And they are truly engaged in our rodeo. And I think our team does a great job of presenting rodeo and explaining rodeo so they can be engaged.
We went to town and we went and ate at one of the steakhouses there in town, a beautiful town. I mean, I guess it'd be a city, excuse me, but just the buildings, everything is so modern looking. Everything looks so new. It is a beautiful place. And to be able to, which also your guys' fireworks are top notch. We sat up there and me and the kids on the top of the trailer, and it was like, damn, like America needs to step it up. Like these fireworks are like, I've never seen it before like this. It was amazing. But then to see the city in the background as the fireworks were going off, just the setting of it was so cool.
Yeah, it's incredible how close we are to the downtown area. And that's because we've been on this property since 1889. We were actually formed as the Calgary District and Agricultural Society in 1884 to really encourage farmers from Eastern Canada to come here and start farming and really capitalize on the potential of this area. And held our first agricultural fair in 1886 and moved to this property in 1889. So the city, my point with that is the city has grown up around us. We are very much visible. We're walkable from the downtown core, and that's pretty unique for a stock show and a rodeo to have that much proximity. And with regard to the fireworks, it's funny because I was inviting some of my American friends to come up, and they said, what day do you start? And I said, July 4th. And they said, well, I don't know if I want to miss the 4th of July. I said, don't worry. We got you covered on the fireworks.
Yeah. Yeah, it was phenomenal. And just for everyone to know, it's something you should see. I am telling you, I did not, like it was, looks, I had to fly there from a school and leave. And it was something everyone should put on their bucket list. Because if I remembered right, the fireworks come from inside the arena, like some of them. Don't some of them come right
in the infield? Yeah,
in the infield, yeah, and it's right there. It is a sight to see. It was very exciting.
The drone show that we've added as well is pretty cool as well toward the end of the evening show. Yeah.
Those are new. Those I've never seen those before. This is the first year I've seen the drone shows. Those are exciting too. It's amazing the technology of what drones can do now, where you can just put anything you want in the sky.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've been doing that for quite a few years now, but that's a hit with our audience as the evening show comes to an end. And then, of course, we cap it off every night at 11 o'clock with fireworks. And for your listeners who haven't been up here in July, it's 11 o'clock because it really doesn't get dark until about 10:45 in the summer here, and the sun will come up around 5 a.m. So you can get a lot done in a day if you want to.
Yeah. Yeah, that a lot to do with the Northern Lights, correct? Where the sun, I remember being up there a lot rodeoing and yeah, a lot more daylight in the summer than a guy's used to seeing, that's for sure.
Yeah.
What is the economic impact? I grokked it or chat GPT'd it last night, and it was phenomenal when I looked at like 282 million in 10 days is what the Calgary Stampede economic impact is.
Yes.
Just in that area. And I don't even think, and I think it's 500 if I remember right, what it does to the province. Does that sound about right?
Year round. Yeah, well, actually, there's a year-round number and just a 10-day Calgary Stampede number because we operate this park year-round. So we operate the convention center and have a strong and increasing convention and events business because we just finished expanding our convention center last year. It's up over 1 million square feet. And as you saw, just state-of-the-art, beautiful space. We will also host events like we just had a cutting horse competition here on Park and the Nutrien Western Event Center last month, and a 4-H rodeo. And so we'll have events throughout the year that bring people from outside of Calgary and generate economic impact. And that's what it takes to generate economic impact. If you're just drawing a local audience, they're spending money that was already here. If you draw from people from outside of the city, that brings money in. And of course, that's what happens during the 10-day Calgary Stampede. That's what happens with a major convention. We hosted the Rotary Convention Rotary International Convention in June, and there were 15,000 people here for about 6 or 7 days. And so that has huge impact. The numbers, Charlie, that you quoted are actually from a 2019 study. We're actually refreshing that study this year in 2025. We wanted to wait to get past the pandemic, of course, to refresh that, but also wait until we had a full year of this convention center being open to do that. But those numbers from 2019, year round, the Calgary Stampede generated economic impact for the province of Alberta of $542 million. And as you mentioned earlier, over 280 million of that comes just during the 10 days. So over half of it comes during the 10 days of the Calgary Stampede. We expect with the increased attendance and our burgeoning convention business that those numbers will be significantly larger than that when we get this revised study back here in probably December.
What strategies does it feel like that you guys have in your marketing that, because you guys stand out so well, and the Calgary Stampede is literally a name that is a household name, to be able to draw from other countries, not only just from Canada, US. When I was there was people from all over the world that came to your event. What strategies and marketing do you guys do to just have such a broad net of getting people there to come to your rodeo?
Yeah, so it's interesting that each of the last 2 years, we've had a little more than 1.4 million people on grounds over the 10 days. So we'll average 140,000 people per day. They stay an average of a little more than 7 hours, so they're here a while. And so that's a lot of people on park. But if you look over the last 4 or 5 years, roughly 73% of those 1.4 million people come from Calgary and the Calgary metro area. So our audience is primarily a local audience. It is a tradition. People love coming to the Calgary Stampede, and we're blessed that they continue to do that. So we do a lot of brand marketing here within our local market, and we're a not-for-profit. We really exist for the benefit of the community, and we have a lot of community programs, predominantly youth programs, but 3,000 volunteers, and a lot of those go out into the community and do good things. The other 27%, or roughly a third of them, are from Alberta, but not Calgary. A third of them are from Canada, but not Alberta. And a third are international visitors. And we work with partners here like Tourism Calgary, Travel Alberta to really promote the Calgary Stampede within Canada, but also in other countries to encourage people to come. Probably not surprising to you, the greatest international visitation comes from the U.S. It's usually 3 or 4% of that 1.4 million that come from the U.S. And so we enjoy really good relationships with those tourism partners here that help us really extend our brand around the globe. But because we've been around for well over 100 years, we're known around the globe. And so it's really a matter of capitalizing upon that and reminding people it's coming and you should be here.
Yeah. Hey, friends, if you're looking for something that inspires grit, creativity, and good old-fashioned hard work, you've got to check out Ezra Tech Ranch Gear. This isn't just another brand. It's a group of homeschooled teenagers who are learning to enterprise, building real skills, and producing high-quality gear that stands up to ranch life and beyond right here in Texas. Each piece is hand-tooled by these young men and women themselves, and the craftsmanship speaks for itself. Their truck scabbard? It's their top seller. Rugged, practical, and built to last. If you're looking for something unique for your business, they even create custom corporate gifts with your company logo. And here's what I love. Every purchase not only gets you gear you can count on, but it also supports the next generation of entrepreneurs who are learning what it takes to work hard, create value, and build something meaningful with their own two hands. Whether you're a rancher, a business owner, or just someone who loves quality American-made gear, check out Ezra Tech Ranch Gear at EzraTechGear.com. To get a 10% discount, use promo code CHARLY10. That's CHARLY 10. EzraTechGear.com, where craftsmanship meets enterprise and the future is being built one tool at a time. What challenges do you guys have outside of the arena? I know that there's some rodeos that struggle with a lot of activism and things like that, animal welfare that a guy has to be aware of. What challenges do you guys feel like you guys have
Yeah.
with some of those organizations?
Yeah, we definitely face some scrutiny here, and I would say a lot of it is centered on chuck wagon racing. Historically, there have been some incidents on the track in chuck wagon racing, particularly collisions, that clearly aren't favorable. And we've taken a lot of strides both on the chuck wagon track and with our chuck wagon racing program, and in the rodeo arena that we'll talk about here in a bit, to make sure that we are presenting, first of all, mitigating those incidents, but presenting those events to our largely urban audience in a way that is palatable to them, that is acceptable to them. Because we want to continue to sell 98% of our rodeo tickets, and we want to be able to sustain that. And so chuck wagons, it was invented at the Calgary Stampede in 1923. It's the first place it ever occurred. And it historically had been 4 wagons in a race. We dropped down to 3 wagons in a race in 2022. That in itself limits the potential for an incident to occur, but we also focus on animal welfare, animal health with inspections. We use ground penetrating radar on our track and in our rodeo arena to make sure that we don't have any spots that might be problematic for a horse that's running full out. Because fractures, of course, are a concern. These animals are inspected upon arrival. They're inspected daily. They're microchipped. They're required to rest. If a chuck wagon driver runs a horse 3 days in a row, they get a day off. If they run 4 days in a row, they get 2 days off. And we know because they are microchipped. And we're doing some groundbreaking research with troponin testing with the University of Calgary College of Vet Medicine. And troponin is a compound that's released by the heart when the muscle is in distress. And so we're building that database. It's not entirely predictive yet, though I will tell you 2 years ago, we had a horse that tested off the charts, and the vet went to the owner and said, do not run this horse. And the owner complied. But we're doing things like that to try and minimize. As we all know, when you're utilizing animals for competition, you can't eliminate all risk, but we are doing our best to eliminate as much risk as possible because we are presenting to largely an urban audience. This is not a traditional rodeo crowd. They probably don't know that much about chuck wagon racing, except it's really exciting to watch. Exactly. And they love it right up until the point where something goes wrong. And so we're doing everything that we can to eliminate the possibility of something going wrong.
Yeah, that's very interesting. That's interesting technology. So let's move into breakaway. I think this is the first new event you guys have had maybe since the late 70s, maybe since barrel racing became a part of the rodeo. And so breakaway, it's really hitting a lot of strides, seeing since COVID where Houston's starting to add it, San Antonio, all the way to the American, the top rodeos now in the world, now you guys being a part, welcoming them in. I'd like to hear what you guys looked at and what were the numbers, what was kind of the thing that stood out to you as like, hey, this event would really fit into our rodeo.
Yeah, and we feel like we're a little late to the party, to be honest with you. COVID was really challenging for the Calgary Stampede. I know it was challenging for every stock show and rodeo in North America. I don't mean to imply that, but in Canada, not-for-profits are actually discouraged from carrying a large financial reserve. You can carry over reasonable operating expenses from one year to the next, but my point there is there was no rainy day fund when COVID hit, and our entire business model is predicated on people gathering, whether it's 10 days of the Stampede or for a convention. So there was no revenue. We laid off 80% of our workforce. We took on debt just to keep the lights on. And it took us a while to recover from that. We had to get, 3 good Stampedes under our belt where we started to catch up, pay down our debt, catch up on some deferred capital maintenance on this park, because again, we maintain this park year round. And so it really wasn't until this year that we felt we were in a good position to add breakaway roping. And it is an absolute value add for our rodeo and our presentation. As you mentioned, 1979, last time we had an event, that was women's barrel racing. So it adds another ladies event, which is great. We know from our surveys that 52% of the people who come on our park are female. I can't break that down in the stadium because I don't have that detail, but we know over 50% who come to our grounds are female. Secondly, it's fast paced. It's easy for an audience to understand, even a non-rodeo audience. You explain it to them, they watch a few runs, they know. And that was clearly evident that very first performance, when there was a good run. Unfortunately, I had to run off site, so I was kind of watching it on the Cowboy channel on my phone, and I heard, and it's about a 10-second delay, and I heard a roar from the stadium, and I turned to the person next to me and said, "This must be a good run." And it was, and that was the very first performance, and just the energy. But it's fast paced, it's easy to understand. And the other thing for us that is truly adds value is that we just talked about animal welfare and the scrutiny we get, and our largest detractors, the Vancouver Humane Society, which takes out last 2 years have taken out billboard campaigns against us in May and June. The calf always wins. Yeah. The calf always wins. Whether it's caught or not, the calf always runs down the arena. That's favorable for our audience. We know from our survey, we do a lot of research here, and we've been tracking animal values of our market and other Canadian markets since 2013. Our audience is not crazy. I will just tell you, they're not crazy about tie-down roping, and they're not crazy about steer wrestling. The things that describe them most for our audience is they feel sad and they're confused. With breakaway roping, they don't have those feelings. The calf always wins, and we purposely put it after tie down and steer wrestling. So the last thing that audience sees from that end of the arena coming out of those boxes is something that they perceive as favorable. I don't know if that's conscious or subconscious when they walk away, but that definitely has value for our audience.
I watched when Jackie was up, and I think it was the last set, if I remember right, because I was out there with them for a couple of weeks, and we were watching on the Cowboy channel every single night because, she's trying to watch the start, watch the vibe of the roping. You know what I mean? Is like, what's the start look like? Where are they catching? What's a good time? What's making it back? And it was pretty soft. And then when I was up there, I mean, these girls showed out. I forget how many girls were under 3.5 seconds. And I think only one miss. And I was like, dang, what a great time to like show out. And, that first year, and then it just got a little faster. And then I think that last perf was when Jackie set the arena record, and every girl was just dinging them. And you could feel the electricity in there. And it was great. I was like, man, that was so important, I think, to have one of those sets that it just rings the bell, especially your first time having that event, to have it where it shows out.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I was explaining to Jackie, I mean, for me personally, I'm a bit of an amateur historian. I've studied the Calgary Stampede history, but history of rodeo as well. And in the early days of rodeo, early 1900s, there was a women's event for pretty much every men's event. They were out there. And some incredible female rodeo athletes during that time period. Flores Ledoux, who was one of the founders, she and her husband, Guy Wiedek, founded the first 1912 Calgary Stampede. Lucille Mulhall was our first bronc riding champion in 1912. Tilly Baldwin was outstanding. But one that really stands out for me historically is Bertha Blanket. Bertha Blanket was born in Ohio, grew up around Sterling, Colorado. She was the first woman to ride a bronc at the Cheyenne Frontier Days in 1904. She was the only woman at the very first Calgary Stampede in 1912 that entered all events, and she placed in 4 of them, winning the relay race. And she came like 14 points shy of winning the all-around, beating the men, mind you, at the Pendleton Roundup in 1914. And it's a little bit unfortunate. You trace it from there forward. That might have spelled the beginning of the end for women in rodeo for a while, because the men didn't like that. and you started seeing rules being passed where women weren't eligible for all around, and you gradually saw women's events being removed from rodeo. And even though I think it was called the Girls Rodeo Association really sanctioned and offered all these events, committees didn't pick them up. And so through the 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, you saw women disappear from rodeo. And of course, they came back with barrel racing. As I just mentioned, we didn't add it at Calgary until 1979. But it's sad to think about that had they continued in that arena, where they might be and what position they might have in the presentation of rodeo. So for me personally, there's a bit of make good that needs to happen here. And so adding breakaway to our performance was particularly rewarding.
Well, we went down a lot of the numbers, and I don't know if you've kept up with Kendra Santos. She does a lot of journalism, in our industry and stuff, and talking about a lot of when they keep track of, I think Fort Worth, I think 60% of ticket sales were female. I think over 50% of Houston was female, and you're keeping track of these stats. To me, that's important as you're trying to find out what works for your rodeo, because if you have 26,000 people at a performance, you're trying to get them all there into your rodeo. And so I think it's great where people are looking at those to be able to see what works and what doesn't. And I was looking at your economic impact, and Vegas only shows 200 million in the 10 days during the NFR, and where you guys, it shows 282 million, and you're like, damn, either Vegas ain't keeping track of their numbers, or you guys have become a powerhouse of a rodeo for what you guys are doing up there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we're pretty proud of that. And that's a key selling point here in our market, and working with our city officials and the provincial government. They know what a driver we are, and that makes us better partners for them. And we benefit greatly from their partnership.
I thought it was interesting. Jackie was telling me that the start was a little bit longer, like the head start they would give the calf. They said it was a little bit longer in the breakaway than it was the calf roping. I thought that was an interesting perspective. What was the strategy behind that?
Yeah, so in tie down roping, I will tell you, I just mentioned earlier that it's not a favorite of our urban audience. They have concerns with it, and so we have been granted exemptions by the PRCA that we are incredibly grateful for to present, and largely this comes out of the 12 or 13 years that the Calgary Stampede was not a PRCA rodeo. We actually found better ways to present rodeo to our urban audience during that time frame. And so when we returned to the PRCA, we told them we can't go backwards on this stuff. It will harm our long-term sustainability of our ticket sales and potentially sponsorships. We can't afford to have calves jerked down in front of our audience. We just can't. And we know that from our research. And so in the tie down, it's a 17-foot box. We have a 10.5-foot score. We want those contestants on those calves quickly, so they don't get a chance to get up to full speed. They don't get that much of an opportunity to change direction and create some challenges. We use smaller calves in most rodeos because they hit the end of the rope less hard, and we feel like it gives those contestants greater control over their slack and control that calf. One of the exemptions we have, we require that calf to basically maintain its footing as it makes the switch, or it turns back toward the contestant. And in doing that, we are presenting tie-down roping in a way that is acceptable to our urban audience. And then at the end of the run, it's 3 seconds. So the second that the contestant calls for time after the tie, they start walking back to their horse, that calf only has to stay tied for 3 seconds. So by the time they're back on their horse, ride forward, and put slack, our untied group is there. That calf is not laying there unattended for the 6 seconds that you would normally see. And I will tell you, when that arena is full of water, which has happened in the past, I was here as a guest in 2016, that's meaningful there. So you don't have a calf laying there for 6 seconds in about 6 inches of water. So all of those things combined with drawing in the 30 best tie-down ropers in the world, we are presenting tie-down roping in a way that is acceptable to our audience, and we feel that it's sustainable. that being said, our audience still has concerns with it, but just imagine what those concerns would be if
I agree.
calves were being jerked. And I'm not talking about even a classic straight over the top jerk down. Any type of a jerk is not going to be met well with our audience. And so we're very grateful to PRCA. On breakaway roping, we did extend that. It's out to about 13 and a half feet with the 17-foot box. We wanted to get a little farther out into the arena. You don't have the concerns with the jerk out there when they're like that. And in speaking with other rodeo officials and my fellow managers of rodeo throughout North America, their belief was the shorter the score, the more time the contestant is going to take in the box, because pretty much everything's predicated on the start. And so we extended it out a couple of feet to make sure that they're getting set and they're going, and being set isn't the entire run. On steer wrestling, we use a 10 and a half foot. So it's even shorter than we have in tie down. We want those contestants on those steers immediately before they get running fast, so that it helps mitigate, a dog fall or something like that happening. And then the other thing is that at Calgary, again, an exemption that the PRCA has granted to us, and we're very grateful for, a dog fall is a disqualification. So it makes that contestant maybe take just a
little bit longer,
a split second longer, and not even a second, to make sure that steer is set up before they go to the nose.
Yeah.
And so all of those things combined, we feel, help us present rodeo to our urban audience.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to share something with you that I'm very proud of. As a clinician, my goal has always been to give you the tools to get better, and that's exactly what I had in mind when I built my online course, The Basics of Roping. I've got over 2 hours of instruction, everything from a frame-to-frame breakdown of the swing to dummy drills that'll get you ready for just about anything in the arena, plus tips on rope selection and care. Think of it like a clinic you can carry with you. You can pull it up anytime, anywhere, right from your phone or computer. Just head on over to charlycrawford.training, click on the course tab, and get signed up. Let's keep leveling up wherever you are.
I like it. I'm going to get some emails and some hate mail on this, because there's going to be some traditional calf ropers that are not going to agree with me one bit. And I have been saying this for a long, long time, in the fact of, I like that strategy, and the fact that you're trying the calf roping, in my opinion, back in the day when it was doctoring a calf, was not to injure it. It was to doctor it. That calf rope was original when you're doctoring that calf by yourself. And so the goal was to be able to doctor that calf because it was sick. To me, that's how the event was originated back in the day when you were doctoring cattle. And so once it became a sport, there was a time, in my opinion, like I said, I'm going to get some hate mail on some old calf ropers. I get it. But there was a time it was a sport to almost be cruel. And I'm just not a fan of it. I'm not a fan of that. To me, I'm a fan of the animal more than I am concerned about the people that are going to complain anyway, which is, your activism. I like the fact that you're trying to make sure that calf stays safe during the event. That's all I'm looking for myself. Guys are getting better with handling their slack. It's faster. And another thing is too, I'm a fan of, once that rope is tied, once that calf is tied, my opinion, there should be a time limit on how fast they get back to their horse. That's my deal. I think they should have 3 seconds to get on their horse or they get disqualified. And I know I'm going to get some hate mail, but the calf shouldn't be sitting there choking. The goal is to try to doctor the calf so you can keep them alive, not to, I didn't do no good, and throw your head back and let the calf sit there and choke like that. I just don't like that. And to me, it's a black eye, I think, in our industry when that happens. I like the fact, get them tied, get on your horse. And so I'm a fan of it, even though I know I'm going to get some emails on that one.
Oh, I get them myself. But it's important. And I will tell you what we're talking about here. It all comes down to social license. It really does. Every rodeo in North America is granted a social license by their community to present a rodeo. Some of those social licenses are pretty open. You can kind of do what you want. And some of those licenses, like ours, are pretty restrictive. And I'll make a comparison and contrast between two great outdoor rodeos. Pendleton Roundup, I got to go 3 years ago. Absolutely awesome. You talk about authentic and the feel and the hospitality. Watching those contestants and those bucking horses out there on the grass. I mean, it was incredible. It was awesome, but certainly a difference between the Calgary Stampede. So Pendleton's entire grandstand, I think, holds 17,000 people. The population of Pendleton is 17,000. I'm pretty sure not everyone in Pendleton is going to every single rodeo performance. It allows them to sell everyone out at 17,000. That is a rodeo crowd coming to Pendleton to watch rodeo. Yeah. So they can have events like steer roping. They can have the running start and get farther down the arena. They can operate under kind of standard PRCA rules.
That's a very
in contrast, our grandstand holds 17,000. And as we mentioned earlier, between standing room only, infield seating, infield suites, we're at 25,000. It's not a rodeo audience. I'm not saying there aren't rodeo fans there, because there are, but and it's pretty safe to assume this is the only rodeo they go to every year. And so they will not grant us the social license to run events like the Pendleton community grants Pendleton. And I'm not criticizing Pendleton when I say this, because I'm a little bit jealous.
I get it.
That they don't have to worry about the things that we have to worry about.
Realistically, like where Portland's at, is it's 3.5 hours away. So to be able to get away with that close to it, I've always wondered about that myself.
Yeah, and then the other thing, you made a great point about the evolution of these events. They were to really pit cowboys against each other with the skills that are used on the ranch. Yeah. Now we've evolved into some that probably don't make sense, like riding a bull. It probably doesn't make that much sense to ride a bareback horse from a practical ranch standpoint and not have control of its head.
Well, the bull riding makes sense, because when you get done branding and everyone drank too much, hey, who wants to ride a bull? I can see where that could escalate. Yeah. You know what I mean?
What are you going to do? And steer wrestling, probably not a real place in commercial cattle production today. Yeah. But
I could, and I seen it like back in the day when you would brand, and if they were big and strong, you'd throw them over. So I seen where a lot of it, but I always thought, like, man, I'm not so sure if I was like seeing a couple guys out there in the field and they're like, hey, I forgot my rope. That steer needs doctored. Hey, if I haze, will you run over there and just jump off your horse? We'll throw this steer down and doctor. I don't know if
probably not going there
before, not either.
But, Bill Pickett, we can thank him for that. I think he kind of came up with that as an attraction at Wild West shows, and it grew into rodeo sport. It's a great sport. It's a great event for audience to watch, because it is quick, important to watch. But when we get into events that really do display the skill, saddle bronc riding is a direct reflection on those skills, to be able to break a horse and ride a horse. And the roping events, most certainly. But I think the key difference is that when you're working cattle on a ranch, and you alluded to this earlier, you're not doing it as fast as you can. You're doing it with a certain amount of care, because that animal has value, and people care about animals, not just their value, but they don't want to hurt animals. If you're roping calves on the open range as a cowboy and you're jerking them over left and right, you're probably not going to have a job very long. And yet, when you get into a rodeo arena, there's not a penalty for that, unless they, of course, come straight over the top. It could be a DQ or a fine or something like that. So there is a difference in doing something and demonstrating those skills as quickly as you can, compared to doing it what you do on the ranch. You do it with a certain amount of care. So there's a bit of a disconnect there. And we've tried to address that with all of those changes that I just talked about with regard to tie down roping. We're really trying to address that.
What do you feel like the fans and the committee felt like when the breakaway, when the rodeo was done and the dust settles? How do you feel that breakaway fit into the rodeo year one?
Fantastic. I know that our committee, our board of directors, were just thrilled with it. We're just now getting a lot of our post-show survey information back. It was a hit with the fans. And then just being there, as you saw, you could see the reaction of those fans. It was absolutely fantastic, and we're happy to have it on our rodeo.
I feel like all of us are kind of saying this, and everything would be considered an opinion because there's nothing that really comes out in print. But what do you feel like now that you guys have had it in your rodeo, had breakaway in your rodeo? What do you feel like the NFR not having it during the rodeo and the Thomas and Mack during the national finals rodeo? What do you feel like their perspective is to not add it?
Yeah, and I don't know that I'll comment a great deal about that because we all have to make business decisions. And everything that I've described to you as far as our rules exemptions, the way we present chuck wagon, the way we present tie down roping, steer wrestling, we're granted an exemption on the markout rule because we don't think our audience will understand why someone got disqualified because their spur was a quarter inch off of the horse's shoulder. Those are all business decisions for us that allow us to present rodeo to our audience and sustain our success and sell tickets and sell sponsorships. So as I look at the NFR, I mean, they're making business decisions as well. And I'm not going to sit here and criticize them. I mean, personally, oh yeah, I'd love to see breakaway in the Thomas and Mack. I think it would be an absolute smash hit with that audience. But I think the NFR, they just have to come to a business case on it to make that decision, just as we make adaptations, changes to our presentation. Those are all business decisions.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense because we've been wondering just in the fact of how long it's, well, if we see where you guys have picked it up, the rodeos have picked it up, the acceptance of it, and the only thing I could think of, business wise that would make sense to me is if you only hold 17, 18,000 in at your rodeo and it's already sold out, it's kind of like, all right, how are we juggling everything else? And so business decision is about the only thing I could see where if they had more, like say, for my opinion, if it was an AT&T stadium and there was that many seats, then to me that add-on would be good because it would make sure that you continue to have more of a fan base. But if it's jam-packed that tight and it already sold anyway, that's where I feel like it might be hard to get that punched through with that business decision that you're talking about.
Yeah. And the logistics as well. I know they have some space limitations there and with their production and things. Those are things we had to address as we talked about bringing
you guys
breakaway
are tight
roping
too.
in.
Huh.
Yeah, we're tight on space, and we felt like we could definitely be successful bringing breakaway in. But we ran through those scenarios just to make sure that we were comfortable before we pursued adding it.
Well, talking about now kind of moving on to where you see the future of, say, team roping in Calgary, where the Rocky Mountain Cup, it's expanded to, I think, in August now is when you guys have the team roping.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about that, of where you see where team roping's going, because I think it's just been, is it 3 years now that you guys have had team roping kind of affiliated with the Calgary Stampede?
Yeah, we actually started it in 2021 with our first PRCA sanctioned rodeo that came back in.
Because I remember it was
we added
supposed to be
breakaway.
in 2021, right? But then COVID, is that right? Yeah.
And so it's been in the Nutrien Western Event Center 2022, 2023, 2024. This year we did host it in August, and we made a team roping weekend out of it because there is a strong team roping community in southern Alberta. We had 342 amateur teams come in and participate and compete, which was great, and they had a great time. And we used both the Nutrien Western Event Center, our indoor 2,300 seat facility. We also let them rope in the Calgary Stampede infield. So a lot of selfies being taken by these ropers out there in the infield. And then we also were proud this year to offer some youth events and qualify some youth for the junior NFR, which was really cool. But the highlight of all that was the Rocky Mountain Cup and getting those 30 top teams in here. for a one-day event, $200,000, no entry fee event. Next year, per our agreement with the PRCA, grows to $250,000. The year after that, it jumps up to even money with what we're paying for each of the events during the 10-day rodeo. So jump up to $312,000 thereafter. So they gave us time to build this and grow upon this over those years. And I think it was a success this year. We'd like to draw in a larger crowd, but it's the first year for everything. I think the production, the broadcast was really good, and it really did enthuse our local team roping community and give us a chance to engage with them. So I would deem it a success.
Well, I feel like team roping has evolved a lot in Canada. And what I mean by that is first off, I've always given so much credit to team ropers up there because it's so much more work. We have so much more opportunity down here weather-wise. Like in Texas, we got to wait for it to cool off or wait for it to quit raining. And then we're back at it. The amount of work that so many team ropers have to do, whether, to keep the cattle alive during the snow, having to haul your horses and steers and everything to indoor arenas so you can get some practice in. And to be able to have that much adversity and see the amount of them that are starting to hang with the guys has been impressive. Like this year I've seen where, you guys, the bronc riding is just such a classic event. To me, that is what started rodeo. The horse that couldn't be throwed and the cowboy the cowboy that couldn't be throwed and the horse that couldn't be rode. And so, that was the original, we had to get that horse good enough to ride. So it had to start with the bronc riding. And to me, I feel like Canada has probably had more horses wanting to buck because the feed is good and the weather's cold. So to see where bronc riders coming from up there, it makes sense. You know what I'm saying? The cold weather and the fact that, that those guys had the most opportunities to ride bucking horses. And you guys are known for it. And I was looking at the stats and it was cool to see that, like, I think 12 bronc riders from Canada being in the top 50. What I thought was a great growing number this year was to see 9 team ropers from Canada being in the top 50. And I believe 3 of them this year are going to the NFR. And so watching the team ropers from Canada starting to get noticed and becoming competitive on the big stage, and this is nothing new for you guys. I go back to the gold medalists when we had the Olympics. And gold medalist, you guys took it to us with Murray Lithcom and Rocky Dallin back there. They stuck it on our ass down here too, winning the gold. Levi Simpson, Jeremy Bueller being world champions from up there. What is the feel of the excitement of what the team ropers up there in Canada are starting to do on the world stage?
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And we love seeing those Canadians in the top 50. We love it even more when they're in the top 15. And our crowd wants to see Canadian athletes here. And we actually get criticized outside of the bronc riding that you don't have enough Canadians there. But our qualification process calls for a combination of last year and this year's PRCA standings to identify 25 of the 30, and then we pull 5 from Canada. So we love it when we have Canadian athletes performing on that level. And it's extra exciting when you see somebody like a Zeke Thurston win the bronc riding here and stand in front of that audience. Frankly, a lot of them probably don't know who Zeke Thurston is, but by golly, he's a Canadian. He just won the Calgary Stampede. And so that adds a tremendous amount of excitement.
Yeah. Yeah, because that battle between Canada and U.S. is always, you kind of get to see it in Calgary. Shelby Boschley from Alberta winning the breakaway.
That was a big moment as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So to see that, I think it means a lot to Canada to see the fact that they are getting represented so well on such a big stage worldwide, I think is phenomenal.
The Charly Crawford Podcast is proud to partner with NRS. Don't forget to shop this destination for all things Western. NRS has everything you need from boots, hats, apparel, bits and spurs, saddles, ropes, feed, and more. Visit their flagship store in Decatur, Texas, as well as other locations in Granbury, Texas, and Wickenburg, Arizona. From your hat to your boots and everything in between. Shop NRS in-store or online at nrsworld.com.
When we talk about, one of the things it feels like a little bit is when I've been up there, a lot of the Canadian team ropers have kind of been wondering like why they're not in the Calgary Stampede. And it almost felt like it was, back when I was up there, like the bronc riders really didn't like the team roping and the fact of like there was this rough stock timed event, butting heads of it, because it felt like almost like the bronc riders didn't want the team ropers in, because if there was a base set of added money, if they had a team roping, then it was going to pull the amount of money down that was going to be in their events. So it was almost like there was a little bit of that kind of butting of heads where it's like, hey, you guys, like, this is where we're at. We don't want no more new events because it's going to take away from what we're going to make. And it seemed like there was a lot of headbutting from rough stock to timed events. But the way I've always looked at it, which it was very odd to have that mentality, because the way I've looked at it is it seems like the rough stock and the timed event need each other, because I feel like the rough stock brings in the audience and the crowd because it's exciting and it's fun to watch. And the timed event brings in the numbers. It keeps the doors open in the PRCA, because when you look at membership, team roping is 40% of our membership. It's the highest at 2,300, 224. Like, it's the highest amount of membership. And so to me, you need the fact of, team roping. I think it's a $500 million a year sport, for what it does for the economic impact. There's 2 trucks, there's 2 trailers, there's 2 saddles, there's horses, there's ropes, boots, there's, you name it, on what produces and keeps the Western industry really impactful, because there's times 2. And so you look at it and you're like, why are we not working together in the rough stock and timed event? Because they need each other. So when you look at the ticket sales, you need those rough stocks, because when you put team roping as a standalone event, you're not going to pack a stands. But when you add the rodeo and all the events, then that's when people come. But then when you look at what keeps the PRCA afloat and membership, you start looking at the timed event, that's where it looks like to me like it evens out. What is kind of your feel on what, kind of that battle feels like a little bit? Is it there, or is it just something that we kind of just make in our head?
I don't know that we've really experienced that battle. As we evaluated adding breakaway roping, we saw it as a complete value add, for the reasons I just mentioned earlier. And also we had a sponsor just lined up and chomping at the bit, to jump in there and take it once we talked to them. When it comes to team roping here, our concern is that it ties back to that research that I talked about earlier. I mean, we're very research driven to drive our business decisions. We know what our audience thinks of tie down. We know what our audience thinks of steer wrestling. We would be adding another event that, quite frankly, will create concern with our audience. 2 guys in a rope on a steer. Now, I say that letting you know I really appreciate team roping. I like team roping. It's actually the only rodeo event I have ever competed in.
It's
my
the golf
college
of our
roommate.
industry. It's the golf of our industry. It's pretty easy to go do.
And I say I use competed loosely. I had my college roommate at Colorado State was a team roper on the rodeo team. He taught me how to heel. He put me on a good horse, knew when to turn the corner, and I could throw a decent heel loop. And I actually won second prize in a little community jackpot in Normandy, Texas in 1990. That's the last time I threw a rope at a steer. I retired with money in my pocket, I guess you could say. So I do like it.
Team roping. That usually is the bait. That is usually the one thing, is once you get that first money in your pocket or that first buckle, and you're hooked, and it just goes.
It's like when I go to Vegas, if I get up at all in a slot, I'm out. It was kind of my team roping career as well. I borrowed a horse. It was my own rope, but I borrowed the horse. I think I paid $10 dinner and I walked away with $26. I
Nice.
think so. I
Yeah.
came out pretty well on that. So
fun.
I say that. I mean, I like team roping. I like watching team roping, and I think there's something to be said for the appreciation of a sport that you have played. And so I think that's why you have basketball, football, baseball are all very popular because people can directly relate to it. A lot of audiences, like I've ridden horses. I've had some that took some hops on me, but I can't say that anything's ever bucked. And so I can just imagine what it's like to get on Calgary Stampede bucking horse. I'm never going to try it, mind you. But when you have that direct, experience, you have a deeper tie to things. So I do appreciate team roping. But adding it to our 10-day rodeo, quite frankly, would bring in another event that concerns our audience. And we just, in the last few years, figured out how to present tie down and steer wrestling in a way that is acceptable to our audience. I'm not sure what that looks like with team roping. I'm not sure what we could do with regard to things like cattle, scoreline, rules, as I mentioned earlier, in steer wrestling and tie down roping. And so it does present some risk for us to add it in front of that urban audience for a 10-day rodeo. We're happy to support it. We're happy to have offered this $200,000 no entry fee roping that in 2 years will grow to $312,000 or $314,000. But I don't know that we've solved how we would present it in front of our audience for 10 days, to be quite frank.
One thing that I thought that you guys, when you talked about the calf roping, when you shorten up the barrier to where you're able to utilize with your slack, that was the one thing that I thought, because Jackie was telling me that. I'm like, man, that is a great strategy. Because I think the biggest thing I feel like in team roping, if it was in the performance, would be as if that steer was limping off. And
Yeah.
it got me thinking was, I would wonder, with that left fence being as close as it is to the head box and a short start, and on slower steers, if that keeps everything from getting pulled too hard to where the steer can just lope on off.
Yeah.
It's like, because that was the
Things
biggest
like
thing
that.
I thought of was if
Yeah.
I was to do a strategy, kind of what you guys talked about in the calf rope, and I wonder how a guy would be able to add that with that same in mind of your audience to the performance to where everything would run smoothly.
Yeah. And so I'll say this with full acknowledgement. When you start messing with rodeo, people get upset. You talked about the traditionalists, but maybe things like requiring a clean horn catch so they can handle those cattle better. Maybe the header has a shorter rope to make them ride up on them and make that clean catch. And to your point, turning them before they get up to speed, because it really comes down to audience. It comes back to that social license. It comes back to your audience. And our audience, you talked about a steer limping off. That's not going to go over well. Now, for a traditionalist who's been around rodeo, and I'm not a rodeo contestant, but I grew up around rodeo. My father was a bull rider in junior college, and I had an uncle who qualified for the saddle bronc at the national finals in the 60s. And so I grew up around rodeo, not necessarily competing in rodeo, but we kind of assume, well, that just goes with the territory. You're going to have some that get hurt. You're going to have some calves that get jerked down. It goes with the territory. That's not the way our audience sees it. They don't want to see that happen. And the other thing I would say about our rodeo, they're buying a pure rodeo ticket, and it's not cheap. I mean, you want a decent seat in the lower bowl, you're paying $150. You want to sit in the infield behind the bucking chutes, it's $350 for a ticket. So they're paying purely for a rodeo ticket. There's no concert afterwards, like we had when I was at the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo. Mm-hmm. So what they see, they have an expectation it's going to be acceptable to them. And so a steer limping off, a calf getting jerked over, not good for our audience. Definitely not good. They're not going to accept that as well. That's what happens. Not that anybody's trying to do that, but we know those things will happen from time to time, but it's just not acceptable to our audience.
So the last question I would ask would be for the team ropers in Canada, the enthusiasts up there that are watch Calgary their whole life and just would love to run one steer in there and be a part of the perf. What is first the question is they would want to know why, which I feel like you've answered a lot of the why and what you feel like or where it's not in the performance. The next question I would ask is, if we're looking at a crystal ball, do we foresee it anytime in the future where team roping is a part of the Calgary Stampede during the rodeo?
Yeah, and I always, you brought up a good point there. We've kind of covered the why, and as I explain things to people, I don't expect them to agree with me. Never expect that. I hope they understand, though. That's all I'm trying to do is create some understanding as to why. As far as near future, yeah, not in the next few years. We have our agreement currently in place with the PRCA. We committed to growing that purse from $200,000 to over $300,000 over the term of that agreement. We kind of like the Rocky Mountain Cup. We like the opportunity of having this kind of local roping tied in with it. So not in the immediate future. And it comes back to some of those things we talked about earlier with regard to logistics and presentation. There are time constraints you have to think about with regard to rodeo production. Breakaway didn't add that much time, quite frankly. And again, we saw it as a complete value add for all the reasons that I've talked about. There are some considerations that have to be made when you make those types of decisions. But the biggest thing for us is, can we present it to our audience in an acceptable manner? That's really the biggest question that has to be answered for us to consider putting it into the performance.
Well, I definitely appreciate your time. I think this is something that should be a bucket list for everyone that's been to rodeos before. It's like I said, I've seen all of them. I've been to all of them, and this one was special. It was really, from the excitement to being outside, the fireworks, amazing steakhouse there, a great city, a great setting. It's a bucket list rodeo that I've enjoyed being able to go watch Jackie and see it, and to be able to watch those bucking horses when you bring them all out there and see, because I've always been a huge fan of Calgary Stampede bucking horses. When you see them in the finals, they're big, they're beautiful, they're massive. And when you get to see them buck and you get to watch the bronc ride and you get to see the best horses and the best athletes, going at it up there, and it's a phenomenal event. I love the fact that the breakaway ropers now have the opportunity to be in that circle, and what you guys do to keep expanding and growing that event, man, is phenomenal. It's something that I think everyone should try to make sure it's on their bucket list to see. It is a phenomenal event.
Yeah, well, we'd love to have everyone come see us. And I tell you, I have the greatest job in the world. I really do. To work here in this community for an organization that is just really central to the community. 3,000 volunteers, 340 full-time staff, 900 part-time staff, 4,000 seasonal staff that come in and put on the Calgary Stampede. And all of them are focused on hospitality, providing a great experience. And you throw on top of that our year-round with the convention centers. You mentioned Stampede Ranch. We have a cattle ranch south of here. Just that diversity of our business model and our ability to engage with people on so many different levels. It's incredibly rewarding. And I hope to see you up here again in 2026, and would certainly invite all of your listeners to come up and join us during the Calgary Stampede.
Well, I appreciate your time, and I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you being able to take questions on. Well, we love the fact of, what some committees would be listening to it as, the people that don't have breakaway yet, what that did for your rodeo.
Yeah.
And then I appreciate you too being able to ask questions, because I'm a team roper. And so, so many guys that would love to know is the question of, why is it not in the Calgary Stampede? And so to take your time and to come on here and be gracious to answer the questions that a lot of guys have, man, I sure appreciate that. And, of course I'm rooting for it. So I'm really going to be like, hey man, here you go. If you need any help on any of this stuff right here, love to be able to direct it that way. But I appreciate your time, and I appreciate you answering the questions.
Yeah. Well, I thank you for having me. I hope you don't get too much hate mail.
Oh yeah. That was all mine. That was my bad if I did. So it was all self-inflicted. Joel, I appreciate you. Thanks so much for coming on.
All right. Thank you, sir.